the armies of the Emirate of Cordoba had destroyed the Asturians. Now, with Alfonso II leading the Christian kingdom, Hisham would try again to devastate the northern lands. After the beating the Muslims had given the Christians, Hisham felt safe in his lands. And seeing that he could enter Asturias whenever he wanted, he prepared a new punitive campaign against the kingdom of Asturias. Therefore, in the year 792, he sent an army from Cordoba to the north. Instead of entering through the middle of the Cantabrian mountain range, he would enter through one of its edges. Which one? Well, this time from the east. He arrived at the Ebro Valley, and from there he devastated the lands of Alava. Do you remember that in the previous video I said they were conquest campaigns? Well, this was also one, but let me clarify. These campaigns are not looking to take over the cities and have them under the direct control of the Emir of Cordoba, right? These campaigns aim to devastate the entire kingdom of Asturias, destroy churches, burn towns and villages, ravage fields, slaughter livestock, and kill every Christian they find. And why this hell on earth? Because the Emir's intention was for Christians to feel completely defenseless and insecure in their kingdom, so that they would understand that it was better to swear vassalage to the Muslims. Instead of conquering their lands, he would conquer their minds. A wise decision. After burning Alava and bathing its fields in blood, the army returned to Cordoba without casualties. Alfonso watched this campaign helplessly, but he couldn't react. His army couldn't face the Muslims in open field for now, and after this successful expedition, the Andalusian general al-Malik received a new mission. He would take Girona and eliminate the emerging Hispanic mark that Charlemagne was creating on the south side of the Pyrenees. Malik gathered an impressive army, tens of thousands of warriors, a large contingent of cavalry, a great number of war machines like catapults, battering rams, ladders, or siege towers. Everything was gathered in Cordoba, and given the signal, the army set off in a northeast direction. It might seem like too many troops to take a simple city like Girona, and indeed it is. But Malik had an additional mission, to penetrate into Frankish territory after dismantling the Hispanic March. The Moorish army arrived in Girona and razed it to the ground. He destroyed the walls with his siege machines, and the Muslim troops penetrated through the various breaches and razed everything. They burned what they could and stole all the treasures they could carry. Once the city was taken, the Muslims set course for Frankish territory, and while they are on this campaign, we will stay on the peninsula. Hisham decided it was time to launch another campaign against the Asturians. Would he use the tactic he had used before against Bermudo? A pincer would again enter from the east, and instead of from the west of the kingdom, it would go directly north. Well, he wouldn't be content with devastating Alava, Cantabria, and Galicia. No, this time he would go for the capital, Oviedo. When Malik's army returned, victorious and with thousands of Frankish slaves, Hisham launched the campaign in the year 794. Malik headed north, while the other army, under the command of Abd al-Karim, his brother, would go northeast. The Muslim infantry was already known. The route of Sobra to the east will not be anything different from previous expeditions, so we are going to focus on Malik's army. Thus he reached Astorga. From there he took the Mesa road, which allowed him to avoid gorges. Most of the journey crossed the mountain range without problems, and his army spread out around Oviedo while the main force laid siege to the city. And where were the necessary hosts of Alfonso, who was supposed to be the savior of the kingdom for having the blood of Don Pelayo, as they were hidden? They could not face the Moors in open field, so they had to be content with lurking the enemy force. But not too close either, as the Muslims had a powerful cavalry force. The Muslims finally breached the defenses and swarmed into the city. Their mission was to raze the Asturian capital, again to show the Christians that there was no safe place for them on the peninsula if they did not submit to Islam. Finally, Malik decided that there was nothing left to burn, and after looting Oviedo and its surroundings, he gathered the army and they began the journey home. Alfonso saw that they were returning by the same place, and knowing the terrain, he left with his troops in a hurry. There was a single point on the return path where an ambush could go well. He had to try. This battle, unfortunately, is poorly documented, at least on the Christian side, so I'm going to try to recreate it as best I can. And in the middle of the road, he dodged a small mountain, a big mount. Of course, the road narrows, and the curious thing is that on the other side of the road there is a small drop and a mud pit. The Asturian army positioned itself at the top of the mountain, lying down and hidden among the vegetation, waiting for the signal. The Muslim army, confident, had no vanguard or anything. They marched in column, celebrating their recent victory against the Christians. When the Muslims were right below the mountain, Alfonso gave the order. A rain of arrows fell on the Moorish column, arrows, stones, and javelins. Everything was useful to be thrown at the infidels and end their lives. The Asturian infantry formed a precarious wall of shields in front of the archers along the entire hill. Their mission was not to charge for the moment, but to prevent the Muslims from serving the archers. Another group of Asturian infantry ran to the road and formed a front there to prevent the Moors from being able to flee forward. After the initial projectile casualties, Malik coordinated his warriors to charge uphill. The Asturian infantry had no problem stopping the Muslims as they charged in a disorganized manner uphill. In addition to being surprised and uncertain about how many Christians were attacking them. The vanguard of the column attacked the Christians blocking the path, but while they were fighting, they were assailed by the archers from the hill. The Muslim cavalry veered off the path to the right to try to escape the rain of projectiles and circle the hill, to attack the ambushers from behind. But since they didn't know the terrain, they found themselves trapped in the scree. Unable to move, the riders watched helplessly as their foot soldiers were torn apart by the Christians. But in addition, they were aware that when the infantry fell, they would be next. Mali was warming up his warriors from the rear, but an Asturian arrow flew straight at him and pierced his chest, throwing him off the horse and ending his life immediately. The Muslim army had just lost its leader. An ambushed army suffers harshly physically and morally, but if it also loses its general, the army inevitably falls apart. And that's what happened with the Muslims. Seeing their general die, fear overcame the infidels. The Moorish rearguard turned around and ran, trying to escape the way they had come. Alfonso II, seeing this, sent his cavalry to pursue these warriors and prevent them from returning to Asturias and causing further problems. The rest of the column tried to escape through the closest area, the Lodazal, but they didn't know it was a Lodazal. They started running through there, and due to the weight of the weapons and armor, they found it extremely difficult to advance, but they had no other choice. Throwing away their weapons, they advanced step by step through the mud. The Asturian archers descended to the path, and positioning themselves next to the mud, they riddled the defenseless Muslims with arrows from behind. Those who managed to escape, having lost their supplies, strength, and their companions, would surely be executed by the local peasants. Bloodthirsty from the devastation they had endured days before, the battle had been a success and was named the Battle of Lutos or the Battle of the Muds. The invading army had been vaporized and its general executed. Although it seemed like a complete victory, it must be taken into account that the Asturian army had only been able to win in an ambush. In open field, they were still weak against the Emirate. On the other hand, it was demonstrated that an enemy army could freely camp throughout the kingdom of Asturias and devastate everything. Alfonso saw the need to establish a network of fortified points that would harass the enemy and delay them. He would accelerate the construction of the castle on the banks of the Nalon to prevent new attacks on Oviedo, and he would consider the construction of new fortresses throughout the kingdom. Alfonso returned to Oviedo, where he began the reconstruction of the city and its defenses. no one could blame him for anything, as he had avenged the insults that the Moors had inflicted on the Christians. Hisham raged at the news and learned from the defeat. He would launch a new campaign, even bigger and more devastating, to destroy the Asturian kingdom and capture the very king of Asturias, Alfonso II. But we will see this in the next video.